Have you ever just picked up a book and had to buy it or couldn't stop reading it?
Way too many times to count. I love that when that happens.
I hate it because our house is filled with books. She picks them up, she gets sucked into the story, and that's it. She has to have it.
Yes, we have to have it.
So, what is it that hooks you?
Well, I think that when it piques my curiosity and it makes me want to know what happens, that's when I have to buy that book.
So, where does that start? That curiosity's got to get going here somewhere. So, where is it that it starts?
The curiosity starts with the title, and then I flip the book over and I read the book blurb, and then go, I'm still curious. Then I open it up and I read the first line, and quite often we'll stand in a bookstore and read the entire first chapter because I'm curious and I want to know what happens.
So at that point, you've really been hooked. You've been drawn into the story and you just can't help yourself. You have to buy another book.
Yes.
A good hook is going to get people's interest and cause them to purchase the book and then read the book.
Yes, because it's not enough to just hook them and get their attention. We want them to keep reading the book. And so when we're talking about hooks, the one thing that's really critical to keeping the reader engaged and reading is emotional connection.
That emotional connection comes from things like external conflict, but what we really want to see is the character's internal conflict. How are they responding to what's happening to them or around them, the situation at hand? That's where you're really going to start picking up on what's going on the internal side so that you can see that struggle that they're having.
You can also do things like, what does the character want or need? And what is preventing the character from getting those things? That's a really great way to have emotional connection with the main character and the reader.
The emotional connection plus things like intrigue or suspense or action is what creates a great hook and will pull your reader in, and they'll want to know what's happening in this story. And chances are they're going to buy your book. So let's talk about some of the things that we can use to create that hook that will pull people in.
Well, one thing is your first line. You want your first line to startle the reader, to have intrigue and build curiosity.
So give me an example of that.
An example of that is from The Keeper, and it says, "It seems both fitting and even absurdly poetic that hitched together like links in a chain, the three of us would die together."
That's pretty good. Another thing we can do is use action. We can jump right into the middle of something that's happening, and that pulls people in.
Now, I suppose you have an example of that?
I did. This is from my sci-fi book that's going to be released here pretty soon. So this is the first line. Case, I sealed the leak, but there's still no power to life support, and the oxygen levels are very low. We don't have much time.
That is very interesting. It definitely jumps right into the middle of something.
Makes you want my new book, doesn't it?
It does.
Another thing we can use is just simply emotional connections between people. There's lots of different examples we could use there, but we kind of already talked about that. So what's another one, Ange?
Another one would be to use different elements like confusion. You can use an ominous tone. You can have a life-changing event, like something that happens that changes the life of your main character. It can be something controversial or something surprising.
Well, in this generation, there's plenty of controversial things to talk about. So
Yes.
if you open your book with something controversial, it's going to either repel people or draw people. Sometimes the people that are repelled want to read it just because it's controversial.
Another element that you can use in writing a great hook is terrible trouble. We hear about plunge your character into terrible trouble, and that's awesome and great. But the caution with this is you have to create that emotional connection between the main character and the reader before you plunge your character into terrible trouble. Otherwise, the reader doesn't care. You want the reader to care about your character so that when you plunge them into terrible trouble, the reader cares.
Yeah, the deeper the connection between the reader and the main character, the more they're going to want to know what happens when the terrible trouble comes. So
Yes.
create that connection as you create the terrible trouble, and you got a winner. Here's another one to try. Create curiosity, and people will want to keep reading. That curiosity is a really good hook.
It is. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why I buy so many books at the bookstore.
It is. So in your first line, and maybe even beyond that, you can give people a little bit of information, but don't give them all the information. Let them wonder what's happening next. What is going on in this story? And that helps them keep reading. Now, my example of that is from All the Light We Cannot See. And we did a book review on this, so go back and watch that video. It's a great book, but the first line says, "At dusk, they pour from the sky." Now, doesn't that just make you want to know what pours from the sky?
I love that first line.
It's a great one. It creates curiosity. You got another example,
I
right?
have an example too. This is from On This Foundation, which is a great book. And the first line is, Mordecai knew what it was to wrestle with death and win. I love that.
That's a great hook.
It does. It sure makes me curious about what did he wrestle and what does that even mean? So the hook starts with the title,
Right.
and then it goes out to the book blurb.
Right.
And then we have to look at the first sentence and even the first chapter. It's all of that is the hook.
Sometimes people don't take into consideration that the title plays a huge role in creating that intrigue and that hook that pulls people in, as well as the book blurb on the back. That you got to master how to write the book blurb. And I think you did a video on that, didn't you?
I did. There's a video. I will put a link in the description.
All right. So check out those videos and hook people with your writing.